Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I am the owner of Simplify Motion Physical Therapy in Phoenix, Arizona. And with me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution Physical Therapy in Connecticut and Long Island. And we got a great topic for you today. It actually came off of a conversation that Brian had recently. So
Yeah, I
I
joked
just
with. Sorry, go ahead. I'm interrupting
no,
already.
you're
Just
good.
jumping right
I
in.
want you to set it up, man. Like
Yeah.
tell
So
tell
so
listeners what it
so the
is. I
way
think
we were
we got
talking
a
was
great
we were
topic.
hiring. Yeah, we were hiring a new physical therapist, talking with her, and she just asked a really interesting question that just stimulated my thought process on this. Right, and she was like, "How would you classify your clinic? The clinic that you have here?" She goes, "This is kind of like a boutique clinic. Like it's a boutique clinic. That's what I've heard they're called. This is a PT who has like a lot of experience, great physical therapist." Really cool personality. Like I'm excited to make her an offer and hopefully have her part of our team. And I actually joked with her. I was like, I go, this is a really good topic to the point where like we might be talking about this thing in the podcast. I was like like I actually was joking about it with her. And one of the things that I would say was like what was interesting, Owen, was the way that it made me think was she was thinking of us as just like the idea of a boutique clinic versus a mill clinic. Right. And the idea basically of like,
Okay.
and so that's how she was kind of chatting. So
So
it got me thinking more
we're
about
gonna talk
systems.
mill PT versus boutique PT.
Yes.
Um,
And by the way, spoiler alert, I am a very like a pet peeve of mine is when people are like, "Oh, you're talking about insurance versus cash-based PT." To me, that is bullshit. That is not the way. Like we have run into mill PTs that are cash-based PTs. We have run into mill PTs that are insurance-based. We have run into boutique PTs like mine just got talked about, which is an insurance-based PT, and we've talked about boutique as cash-based, right? So
Brian,
the
you
boutique,
can't wait, hold
I
on,
know,
be quiet. You can't say bad things about cash pay PT
I know.
because
There
if
you
you
go.
do, then you must be a corporate big head that
There
doesn't
you
know
go.
anything.
Exactly,
Oh my
man.
God.
So that's
I,
what got me
I
thinking. I mean, we have 20 clinics and she was calling this boutique. And I said, so it just got me on this big thought process of like good physical therapists and bad physical therapists. Sparked a really cool
yeah,
conversation to the point where I was like, first off, it made me just like the person even more. And I confirmed that I really
yeah.
can't wait to hire her. And two was it made me think more about us and having this conversation because I think that one of the confusions that people have about cash physical therapy and insurance-based physical therapy is that there's a boutique aspect of cash PT, right?
Mhm.
And the answer that I would give people is the reason for why people should start cash PT when they're just starting out, like Owen, is because there are a lot of problems cash flow wise at times with insurance based stuff.
Mhm.
That's simple.
Yep.
You are not in control of the money coming in. That has nothing to do with you're so good at physical therapy, you're above the insurance. It doesn't mean,
Mhm.
oh, I want more time with my patients. It doesn't mean that either. It's from business practicality perspective. If someone said, hey, I want to start my business and I'm solo, how should I start? I would say
Uh,
start cash based just because you need money now to scale and grow.
yeah.
That is that
Well,
simple.
and
And,
let's
go
break
ahead.
that down too, because I think that, the popularity of cash-based PT is obviously, star in the eyes, right? Like, how many PTs have been working in clinics and you hear how much United Healthcare pays, or you hear how much, and you're like, oh my God, I spent all this time in PT school and I'm worth it, damn it, and you are, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
all PTs. We know what we do. We know what our value is. And cash PT basically looks at changing the market. You now don't have four payers who are all essentially, for all intents and purposes, a cabal, right? Or what is it? Cartel. And
Yeah.
if you look at a cartel or oligopoly, in other words, they can price fix, right? So with that, PTs see cash and they say, "Well, oh my God, we can actually be in the market like a normal person or a
Yeah.
normal business. Like this is amazing." The problem that I always see, and Brian, you can kind of jump off this too, I have seen, just like you, cash pay PTs who are just chatting up people and massaging them and saying, "Man, I love the way you do this in your house."
Yeah.
Nothing that I would call PT. I've also seen insurance PTs, how they're supposed to be boogeymen. I've seen amazing insurance PTs owned by owners who really want the best for their patients and they make those decisions. I'm breaking this all down to say it's the owner of the damn company. It's not how
Mm.
they get paid. That is the biggest thing that I've taken away from being a cash pay PT, but also being on the other side of corporate, is that really it comes down to who owns the company, who runs the company. We can get into all that. but yeah, that's my 2 cents at least.
Yeah, dude. I think actually one of basically the comment that I have, and I'm going to see if I can keep it under 60 seconds purely for social media purposes. so
Yeah,
so
we got
so
to
here
clip
we go.
this up, man.
And we're going to try and clip it. Here we go. So reminder at 5:09, Owen. All right. So I think there are a lot of good PTs and bad PTs out there. I think for the PTs that think that they're really good, I think that the way to be really good as a good physical therapy as a good physical therapist is to be in a good system. If you're in a
Mhm.
good system, the way you can treat the way you want to treat, and you can be, balanced and be able to do all the things you want to do from a creativity perspective within structure, you can be a really top-notch physical therapist. I think there are a lot of bad physical therapists that will also thrive in that system because the system is there to nurture them and grow. On the flip side, I think really good physical therapists that get stuck in a really crappy system, like you got 4 patients an hour, are going to be really bad at what they do, irregardless, because the system is not there to help take care of them and help them be better. And I think a lot of bad physical therapists will obviously just fall flat on their face there and just end up not a PT. So I think a lot of
Mhm.
it has to do with the system you're in to allow you to grind and flow the right way so you can crush it as a PT. I
Yeah,
think I made a
yeah,
minute there. Yeah,
yeah.
but
There you go. Not bad.
that's literally the monologue that I was thinking. So, kind of like to summarize it is if you're a good physical therapist or a bad physical therapist, in a good system, you'll be able to practice medicine better, even if you're not as experienced or as solid as a PT. If you're a good physical
Yeah.
therapist, I think you can sometimes disguise that in a bad system because you're able to juggle more stuff, but it's still
Hmm.
practicing poor medicine. The system,
Yeah.
in my opinion, matters more than the physical therapist. Number
Yeah.
one. That's what I think that person was asking. She was like, because we see patients every 40 minutes and it's an insurance based practice. So when we do that, and again, we're insurance based but hybrid in the way that we do cash. So there's people that are doing it
Hmm.
differently. But the reality is when you're in a good system like that, I could give a bad physical therapist 40 minutes to the patient and they can do a good job. Right. I think that's
Yeah.
the thing. So what you're trying to do is create a system that is tailored towards good healthcare and patient care. And you got to build a business around, okay, how do I do that? And to go back to what Owen said about the owner, if the owner is a patient centric or employee centric in the sense that they're like, like our company mission, we've said it over and over again, is to change the perception of physical therapy. We do not want to be known as one of those mill clinics.
Yeah.
So we really focus on how do we provide good care. 40-minute sessions, business wise, here's how we can make it work. Let's do it. And now you can
Yeah.
drive around your company values and your core mission to create a system that's effective in driving not only your mission, but also creating good healthcare. And you can also make money at it. What a shock that could actually happen, right? Like
Well,
that can happen in all of it.
and when you look at it, right, and I've been in, big corporations that actually, interestingly enough, they chose to kind of keep a little bit lower level. They let it happen at the clinic manager level. They wouldn't stop a clinic manager from making it into a mill because they were owned by private equity, but they also kept a really low standard. Like I think it was like 11 visits a day, right? Compared to a lot of the clinics in the area, which were like 15, 16. um, and you wouldn't get like a pay decrease because of anything. If you went lower obviously than 11, that was a problem, but that was their lowest possible number that they could make enough profit so that they could still grow, right?
Yeah.
So what I think a lot of PTs who maybe aren't owners or don't have a lot of kind of experience talking with the C suite at their company has to understand is that everyone's making money, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just how much money does the owner want to make and what's the trade-off of I'm going to take a little bit less money to be able to provide what I want to see as a physical therapist. Or I think what you guys did really well is you started out by diversifying into part cash, part fitness. So you could kind of have the best of both worlds in that way where like you'll still have something that you can move the needle on in terms of like income, right? Like fitness and cash based services. You don't live and die by every Medicare update. But at the same time, that allows you the flexibility to kind of choose to do that. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm saying my comment about the owner. And I think your comments about like a good PT and a bad system, kind of like that whole like a beautiful flower in the desert, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Be the most beautiful flower in the world, right? But if it doesn't have water, it doesn't have good soil, it doesn't have all that stuff, it's gonna struggle to become that. Doesn't mean it's not a beautiful flower. Just means it's a way better system when there's
Well,
water and
that
there's
Th-
soil.
that's right. I mean, listen, I'm also not suggesting from that perspective that if we were to put a bad PT in a good system that they're going to thrive, right? That's not what I'm saying
Yeah,
either, right?
yeah,
So what I'm suggesting here is that essentially a good physical therapist will struggle I would put my money on a good physical therapist struggling in a bad system over a bad physical therapist thriving in a good system.
yeah.
And so to your
Well,
point about ownership and how because also like full transparency, we do a pretty good job of collecting like our from an insurance perspective here in Connecticut, like what we collect from insurance, right? We're okay on the pay per visit. So when we do that, the key becomes then you want to increase your volume at that pay per visit. But the reality of the situation for a lot of PT clinics, it's not the actual pay per visit, it's the zeros that you get from the insurance companies. Like where insurance PTs are a problem is if you don't follow the authorization process properly, if you don't verify benefits and you don't collect the right stuff, if you don't do those types of things and you get denials from insurance, you're in trouble. Because it's like I tell people it's like taking a
yeah,
test. If I get 100 and I have say I have 10 tests, let's do 10 visits of physical therapy. So I have 10 tests and I get 100 per test, right? If I get two
mhm,
zeros, all of a sudden my pay per visit just dropped to 80. If I get five
mhm,
zeros, it just dropped to 50. That's the insurance game.
yeah.
The insurance game is optimizing billing, and that's why I think billing software is going to be super important for companies too. Optimizing systems that are put in place so that people are actually billing it properly. Those are important. But again, you also need to give people time because if people are bombarded with 9,000 patients, and that means front
Mhm.
desk people are bombarded with all these people, like that's tough, right? So the aspect of it is how do you create a system where everybody wins? And honestly, I
Well,
know
and
I'm
that's
biased, but my favorite's the 40-minute session. That's just me. But
yeah.
in terms of that process, it's huge.
Well, and I want to pick that apart, but I do want to say if you want to take your PT practice to that next level that we're talking about, at Physio Growth, we provide physical therapists to we guide physical therapists to financial success and practice growth. Visit school.com/physiogrowth mentorship group and grow your future today. So this
Nice.
is the cool part I think about our group is that we it's business owners, right? It's entrepreneurs, it's people who this is their full-time job, you know, wanting to kind of progress with that. And they can look and say, okay, well, how are you doing it in Connecticut? Right. And that's what we want to create with this. We're looking at the market and we're kind of saying, like, there's a lot of gurus out there that say, give me $7,000 and trust me, you'll make money. And, maybe not, maybe relying on some cost fallacy with that. We just, honestly, we just want to provide value. We look at, I think it's $100 a month to do two Q&A sessions a week with Brian and I, to have access to the group of entrepreneurs, to be able to bounce stuff off of. I always said that, like, with PTs who were like, I need a good mentor, like put me with an OCS SCS who's been doing it for 30 years. And I say, well, they're still going to have their own caseload. They're still going to have to treat their own patients. Like, mentorship
Yeah.
relationship, you can have at a distance if you need it, because it's just bouncing stuff off of people, right? It's
Yeah.
this is a good idea. Do I want to do that? And I think that's what we're aiming to provide is something that, like, we can obviously be, good resources for any entrepreneur. But it's questions like this, questions like you're talking about, where a lot of everything that you just said, right? Where you have, well, how do you manage your pre-auths, right, and your authorizations? How do you
Yeah.
manage, are your front desk overloaded? Is your therapist overloaded? They forgot to write the, outcome measure that a certain insurance want. A lot of that comes to leadership, right? And I think that that's where, is especially for this girl, a guy or girl, I forgot, I don't know,
Sure. Yeah.
but they're looking for someone who can lead a company, right? Who can make those decisions. So I think honestly, a lot of it, when you're talking about the details, great, but it comes from the top.
I also think when we talk about this group, I remember the first time when I paid for some mentorship for business wise, I paid 3K, right? And that was several years ago.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming it's more than that now. And when I paid for that money, I remember being like, I don't have that money. And I had to go talk to my wife and blah, blah, blah. Me and Owen generally want to help people and see if we can
yeah,
help the masses at this. So, like, again, it's 99 bucks to start. It's not 3K. There's no catch, right? We will build programs. We will
yeah,
raise prices over time, but it's not now. The goal is to try and help people. And we've
yeah,
already gotten phone call. Here's the ironic part. We've gotten phone calls, people asking for help where I'm like, I know I can help you land a giant contract that's going to make you a shit ton of money. And so
Yeah.
But the thing is, it's not just one conversation. It'd be impossible. I wish I could tell you it was one conversation we could do it. It's several. So
Yeah.
the idea behind this is we can help coach you along the way, and that's the idea. So, I think there's a
It's
lot of
tweaking, it's
process there.
problem solving. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it makes a lot more sense to me and us that we'd rather have a 3 to 5 to 10 year relationship with you than a 3 week. You know what I mean? 6 week program. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's the goal here. So,
Yeah.
but moving on, no, I think in terms of you know how people need to think about, like, for someone like yourself, in the idea of, like, when we first chatted about, like, the nice advantage from the cash PT side is that you can provide a good system and build a good system off the bat while
Mhm.
also not worrying about cash flow all the time. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it allows you now it's a slower build, definitely a slower build,
Mhm.
but it allows you not to have to be worried about cash flow all the time, which I know we've talked about personally. For most PTs is the issue. Unless PTs have $1 million or $500,000 chilling in the bank, I would
Yeah.
never suggest someone taking out a big ass bank loan, because I think that that's also, like, really risky if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
And if you take out a big bank loan, you better join a freaking group and get some mentorship. Spend some of that loan on the mentorship and make sure you're doing it correctly.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of people that think, oh, build it and they will come, and that is just not the way it works. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of it has to do with building a really well perceived, and I take a lot of pride. I told that woman, I go, I take a lot of pride in the fact that you think this is like a quote unquote boutique clinic. I was like, when you think about it, I go, that is,
Yeah.
to your point about the ownership, that is something we work really hard on, is making a really great customer experience, but also a really great place for PTs. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to bring this into. I also think that PT practices, personally, and if you're a PT practice, like, at scale, that has multiple locations, that's listening to this and is struggling to find physical therapists, it's probably because your place doesn't look like a place that PTs want to work. So
Mhm.
another thing, that way the companies are going to exist and be able to get competition, and be competitive in getting employees, is going to be a place where employees want to work, particularly
Yeah.
physical therapists. So that is a big thing that we've noticed in our clinics, is focusing on what our physical therapists want. So again, like, having more time with their patients worked out great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know what? We can't have aides though if we do that, because ultimately we just can't. You're not going to need them. Are you cool with
Yeah.
doing some laundry and cleaning some tables and putting the weights back after yourself? And you're also going to spend more time with patients. We're not going to need them worry about working with clients. Yes, every
Yeah.
PT unanimously was like, no problem, we'll do that. So
Mhm.
whenever you have that problem, you have to remind them, hey, the extra time with your patients that you're getting is at an expense here. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
always be tit for tat, but it's got to be like it's just got to be a realistic business thing. We can't pay for somebody that's not doing anything, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So
Well,
so so
and
that's kind of the
that's
idea.
what I think. My friends in the corporate world, they're all just the entire problem they have is hiring people. They have all the
Yes.
places, they have all that stuff. Everyone knows who they are, things like that. And then I think about our mentorship group member who hired somebody in 3 weeks, right? And it
Yeah.
was literally because of her mission. It was because of what she wanted to do, and that person was like, "Yo, sign me up. Let's go." Right?
Really good.
Um,
Really sorry to
and
interrupt again,
those are
Owen.
those are cool. I know it's just cool. Yeah.
Yeah, really, really good point you just talked about, that I think you and I have chatted about, in particular that individual, right? And the same thing, and I actually brought this up. That's why I'm interrupting, is I brought this up in this conversation we're chatting this morning. Is
Mhm.
the reason this person wants to come work for us is because they were getting sick of the fact that when they were working with athletes, they had to discharge them early. And her exact words, and I've heard we've used this with orthopedic surgeons before. She goes, my biggest problem is that the heaviest weight we had in the clinic was like 20 pounds. So she's like, if I wanted to load an
Yeah.
athlete, I had to discharge him in my willing. I was like, and literally, I'm standing in the middle of the gym. I was like, we have squat racks, we have barbells, we got plates, we got all sorts of stuff around. It's a gym, right? So,
Uh,
like, when she was there, like, she's like, this is where I want to work, because I want to hold on to that client. I want to help them get back to sports. So our
this is
brand.
why I love how they called you a boutique clinic.
Exactly, right? So, like, that's how they think about the boutique side. Exactly. That's the joke that me and Owen have, is I'm like, I don't look like the fluffy, like, look at the white walls and the nice couch and here's the coffee. It's not like,
You have great
it is a
essence.
freaking dirty ass gym. That's like it, like that's what we were standing in a CrossFit gym, and like I love working there because of exactly what she was saying. So if someone's so on board. So what happens is, when you're on point, when you're authentic with who you are as a clinic, you're going to
Yeah.
attract talent. When you are authentically, like, I think the problem with some of these bigger mill clinics is, they're like, we treat athletes, we treat these people, we do this. And then when you walk in there, you're kind of like, is that what this is though? Like it
Yeah.
doesn't seem authentic. So the problem is, when you're that and you're not authentic, Right, it's a sales thing again. Think about it.
Yeah,
How do you sell working here? Oh, you can work here and
yeah,
treat lots of patients and do the job that you normally would do. Guess what? That PT better be asking for more money, and that clinic's better be prepared to dole out more money because the reality is that's the only
yeah,
way you're going to get talent. And so the reality is creating an
yeah.
authentic image. Like these are the I. This is why I work here. I love working here because of X, right? And if
Mhm.
you're authentic, you will attract talent that way. To me, when people are struggling to attract talent, it's not easy to attract talent. I want to make it seem like it's easy, but I feel like we've had less resistance than most because
Mhm.
the people that want to come work for us are looking for us. To your point about what you're
Yeah,
talking about. So this person who hired, they hired really quickly. She was like, I'm just in this great system that I'm looking for this particular person and I happen to find that person. And that was such a niche, right, Owen? Like that was such a very
yeah,
specific niche. Like that's not something that you and I would do. I don't even think we know many people who do that. But she found someone in
yeah.
3 weeks because here's the thing about niching, when you
Mhm.
find that person and they find you, they're like, "Oh my god, that's the only place I can work."
Yeah,
Right? So and now the thing that's good is they really, if you treat them well, they shouldn't go anywhere.
yeah. Well, this was one of my suggestions when I was with one of the big corporations, and I was in their uh, pipeline program where they would, you basically you meet with the C-suite, once a month. And one of my things is like, why don't you just like white label clinics? And for what most people don't know what that means, white label is when someone will provide a service but under someone else's brand, right?
Yeah.
So there's a few companies do that, like USPT and PRN. They do that. They won't change the branding. Then there's other companies like Athletico, ATI, where they change the branding. And I I personally think keep the brand, because if it's a niche clinic, or you should be very comfortable with being okay with the fact that like your only presence in one part of town is like a powerlifting gym, right? And your only presence like three towns over is like a pelvic floor place, right?
Yeah.
Something like that, where I think that could make life a lot easier as you're growing and scaling. Now, I'm well aware that there's very few people listening to this podcast, very few people in the world who are growing and scaling at that level. But it shows you how important niching is, right?
Yeah.
That honestly, the
It's
biggest problem those guys have could be solved by being a place that targets a specific type of consumer.
Here's what I would say, Owen. It's funny because we could do a podcast on this. I know you and I could do that on this piece
Yeah.
because we're a company that is now acquiring clinics and also have different branding. And so I think there are pros and cons to both. To put it in a 60-second snapshot, I think that if you're acquiring clinics and you're branding them the way that you would brand them,
Hmm.
that is actually how I felt like you get labeled a lot as a corporate place. We've been called,
Yeah.
like, that's what's so ironic. In the same 2 weeks, we've been called corporate, but we've also been called boutique, right? In
Yeah.
that regard, ironically.
Yeah.
And so the perception is reality, right? So what ends up happening is if you come over and it looks like a hostile takeover to a degree, and you start switching colors and switching things and switching the
Yeah.
systems and the pricing and how things were run, right? It looks like a corporate takeover to a degree, right?
Yeah.
If you maintain things the same way, right, in that regard, it looks like you're like maintaining the boutique image in that capacity and just changing back end stuff. There's pros
Yeah.
and cons to both because when it comes to long-term branding and long-term building, I would argue that it is actually good to change the name and change the brand to something that's more
Yeah.
uniform because it confuses customers.
If you're
So
big enough. Yeah.
if you're big enough, exactly. I think so. This is actually a very good conversation to spin off and into different stuff
Yeah.
because I think I
Next
could go.
podcast.
We exactly. We how's this? When we've acquired clinics, we've gone in both directions. We've left it actually up
Okay.
to the person. What happens is a lot of times we'll merge into clinics and acquire parts of clinics, not the entire thing. And a lot of times we leave it up to our new business partner. Do you want to keep the name? Do you
Yeah.
want to get rid of the name? Right? In Colorado, we are PhysioPro powered by Evolution. Right? So like
Yeah.
we have a lot of that, and that's because PhysioPro is a great name out in that area in Colorado, right? So it's like
Yeah.
same kind of thing in Connecticut Revolution Physical Therapy, and like and same thing in Long Island, and actually we do have like in Norwalk, our clinic is CT Sports powered by Evolution, but that owner is like, hey, we should just do rebranding and just make it all Evolution and just make it simple, and it's like there's
Yeah.
pros to that because what it allows things to do is there is a shifting that basically it's no longer like this, hey, this brother sister clinic. It's now,
Yeah.
hey, we're one business, and
Well,
it creates a strength too. So there's some interesting. There's you can make a case for the pros and cons on both, and I think the good news is that if you're expanding properly and doing this properly, it's really really good either way.
yeah. And no, and that's it. And that all comes down into the conversation of what does an employee perceive? Because you got to think there are customers too, right?
one Hundred
Um,
percent.
because honestly, we're a people-based service business. Like our number one resources is the people doing the work, right?
100%.
So those are where, I think that especially if you're maybe I got one clinic, a friend's working for me, so I have two PTs, things like that. If you're looking to actually grow and build, these are the types of things you should be thinking about now, right? These are the
Yeah.
types of things of like, how do I take my next 3 or 4 steps? And this is why I think it's, again, important to talk to people who've been there before, right?
Yeah.
So this is why we say you want to transform your PT career with physio growth. We mentor PTs to unlock higher income, build thriving practices, and master the business side of care. Start your journey with us, school.com/physiogrowth mentorship group or mentorship group. We're back to me screwing up these ad reads, man.
Just wouldn't feel right if we weren't. You know what I mean?
I
Just
know.
wouldn't feel right. It wasn't.
I
If it
know.
was
I had like
perfect.
2 or 3 good episodes there, and now I'm like back to my old habits.
Good man. This was good. No, it was a fun conversation. I knew we would talk about it, and I thought it was really good. I'm hoping there's a lot of fun content that people get out of this. So it was an interesting talk, and I'd love to hear comments. So like, if people have interest in like, again, I'd love to hear if you think you're a bad PT in a good system. I'd be interested to hear that. That I
Yeah,
don't know
like
what
how many comments are we
what
gonna get? Like, I'm
what comment.
terrible.
Yeah, I want to hear the comments down on this episode of like, I'm a good T and a good PT in a bad system, or I'm a bad PT in a good system, or I'm a
Yeah.
good PT in a good system, or bad PT. I'd love to hear like how you would even self-evaluate yourself. It'd be very interesting.
Brian, I know all of our listeners are amazing PTs and
The best.
never make a mistake
The
ever
best.
because they're
Exactly.
amazing.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. Of course.
I can't wait for
Awesome, man.
that one PT Twitter account to just be like, I don't know, I just slapped some KT tape on somebody and told them they had like spine arthritis.
I
You
just
know?
ice I just heat, stim, and ice everybody. It's way
Yeah,
easier.
there you
Don't do
go.
any
All right.
manual things. Don't do any exercise. Imagine those days. Imagine those clinics. That exists
Yeah.
somewhere. Like heat,
Oh, it
stim,
still
ice. See
exists.
ya. That's
It
craziness to me.
absolutely, I can tell you in
Do some
Arizona,
straight
it
leg
exists.
raises and see ya. Oh my
Oh,
god.
it exists on a high level here in
Amazing.
Arizona.
That's
All right.
amazing. That's amazing.
So
Be a lot
we will
easier.
leave it
Be a
in
lot easier. That's about as passive income as you can get. Just
nice.
like all you're doing,
Exactly.
you're a tech essentially. I love it.
There you go. All right.
Awesome. All
Well,
right, man.
all right, my friend. Have a good
See you, bud.
Thursday.
You too.
See you.